Roads. The everyday pathways we take for granted, whether it's a dirt trail or a sprawling 6-lane highway. We all know a road when we see one. Some pavement, a few lines, maybe some lights. It's simple enough. Well, actually, not always. There's one road that breaks all of the rules by being both a lot more and also a lot less. Nearly 4 kilometers up in the mountains, there's a road that strikes fear into the hearts of all who drive it. Here, every driver grips the wheel in pure terror. Nestled in a remote part of Bolivia near the Amazon rainforest and La Paz lies one of South America's deadliest killers. The unforgiving stretch of road has claimed countless lives over the decades it's been in use. Today we're diving into a highway with a death toll in the thousands. We'll uncover its history, its legacy, and most importantly, its fatalities. This road is an outcast, a pariah of the road world, and we'll show you exactly why it deserves that title. Despite improvements, people still risk their lives traveling here every year. On this road, death really is lurking around every corner. It's a place where nature rejected human intrusion, a road that shouldn't exist, but does. So, put your seatbelt on, turn that traction control off, and get your last will and testament ready. Because this is La Carretera de los Yungas, also known as El Camino de la Muerte, the most dangerous road in the world. So, you've seen the pictures, it's clearly treacherous, but what earns the North Yungas Road its infamous title of the most dangerous road in the world by the Inter-American Development Bank back in 1995? Well, let's dive into some numbers and find out, shall we? The road was originally built by Paraguayan prisoners of war during the Chaco War in the early 1930s, and it's been in use ever since. In a grim foreshadowing of the road's deadly reputation, the BBC reported that many of those prisoners lost their lives simply building it. The North Yungas Road was constructed as a strategic military route designed to transport troops and supplies between the Yungas region of the Amazon and Bolivia's capital, La Paz. Positioned high in the mountains, it offered a strategic vantage point that Bolivian military strategists valued greatly. This nerve-wracking stretch of road runs from La Paz, the world's highest capital at 3,660 meters above sea level, to the town of Carretera in the Yungas province. And it doesn't waste any time getting there. At its highest point, the road climbs up to 4,650 meters at La Cumbra Pass before plummeting a staggering 3,500 meters down to Carretera. The exact length of the road varies depending on where you start and stop measuring it, but the generally accepted distance is 56 kilometers. This makes the road one of the longest continuous downhill stretches of road in the world. And that, in part, explains why it's also one of the deadliest. For decades, between 200 and 300 people died on this road every year. The BBC, in fact, once reported that in a single year, they didn't specify which one, 25 vehicles plunged off the edge into the ravine below. That's almost one fatal crash every 2 weeks. The road features sheer cliff drops of over a kilometer, with the width of the road itself averaging just 3.5 meters, narrowing to 3.2 meters in some places. Now, you might think that since the average car is under 2 meters wide, it could easily fit on the road, and you'd be absolutely right. But here's the kicker. This road has two-way traffic. Suddenly, it's a much tighter squeeze, especially with the near total lack of guardrails between you and a deadly drop. To make matters worse, large vehicles, much wider than a car, have historically used the road and still do in some sections. The thought of meeting one of those vehicles at a narrow point, forced to take the outer lane with only inches between you and a kilometer-long drop, is enough to send shivers down the spine. Now, those numbers are dizzying enough to give anyone altitude sickness. While the sheer height is impressive and the death toll shocking, it's the combination of factors and hazards that truly earns this road its title as the most dangerous. For starters, the weather and road conditions play a huge role in the high accident rate. It's as if the landscape itself has simply rejected the idea of a road in such a treacherous place. For a good part of the year, it's dry, but as the road moves farther from La Paz and closer to the Amazon rainforest, it turns into more of a dirt track. Even in dry conditions, though, vehicles kick up clouds of dust, reducing visibility for anyone unlucky enough to be behind them. Heavier vehicles only worsen the problem. To make matters worse, the loose gravel and dirt, especially near Chaspipiata, rose a constant threat. Hitting a patch of gravel or having less than perfect brakes can easily send a car skidding. On a normal road, this might be a minor scare, but here, skidding skidding can mean losing control and plummeting to your death. And that is only in the dry season. The rainy season, which hits between December and February, makes the road even more perilous. That dusty dirt track turns into a slick, muddy surface with waterlogged slime, making the risk of skidding far worse than in dry conditions. In fact, some tour guides only recommend attempting the road during the rainy season if you're highly experienced. But this road doesn't care about your skill level. It's full of surprises, and the weather only makes things worse. At higher altitudes, mist and fog are common, drastically reducing visibility. Given the road's numerous hairpin bends, losing control is a constant danger, and if the fog wasn't enough, you may find yourself driving through clouds as the road cuts through the Andean cloud forest, a high-altitude ecosystem shrouded in near constant fog. Up here, powerful gusts of wind can send an unsuspecting cyclist or even a vehicle hurtling into the abyss. Snow is even possible at the highest points. Now, the weather doesn't just affect the drive, it affects the road itself. When it rains, rockfalls and mudslides are frequent, sometimes blocking the road entirely. Without quick intervention, these obstacles can easily lead to disaster. There are stories of truckers who, too exhausted or too terrified to continue, pulled over for the night, only to have the land beneath them washed away by the rain as they slept in their cabs. As you can imagine, the road's reputation for death and danger has made it a place steeped in superstition. Even the staunchest atheists might find themselves praying for a blessing from the goddess Pachamama or pouring beer into the earth as an offering to ensure safe passage. At night, the road becomes even more treacherous. It's completely unlit, and in a country where vehicles are often poorly maintained and kept on the road for years and years, the average car in Bolivia being 19 years old, something as basic as working headlights can mean the difference between life and death. So, what happens if your headlights fail mid-journey? Now, stopping's not an option. You'd be a sitting duck. You'd have no choice but to push forward into the void despite the overwhelming danger. Those climbing up from Carretera hug the mountainside and have the right of way, while those descending from La Paz are forced to take the outer lane. This is meant to slow down vehicles coming downhill, as speeding poses a real and immediate risk of death. With the threat of falling hundreds of meters, would you rush down the road at high speed? Well, probably not. But that isn't all. Beyond the weather, road conditions, and the landscape, there's another hazard: waterfalls. They cascade year-round from the cliffs above, sometimes dropping over 100 meters, and well, where do they land? Well, right on the road, of course. This not only creates a permanent slick in those areas, but the water crashing down on a vehicle or a cyclist can be a dangerous distraction at best and potentially cause physical harm at worst. It's easy to see why all these factors make the North Yungas Road such a deadly place to travel. But don't just take our word for it. A quick look at pictures and videos of El Camino de la Muerte reveals memorials scattered along the route honoring those who lost their lives on this treacherous stretch of dirt. One of the deadliest incidents occurred on July the 24th, 1983, when a bus veered off the road in an area ominously known as Devil's Curse and plunged into the canyon below. All 100 passengers aboard the overcrowded vehicle perished, marking it as the deadliest recorded accident to date. It's said to be Bolivia's worst road disaster, according to dangerousroads.org, an open-source encyclopedia of the world's most dangerous routes. And the death toll doesn't stop there. In December 1999, 8 Israeli tourists were killed in a jeep accident on the road. More recently, in 2019, a bus carrying 25 passengers went over the cliff, killing almost everyone on board. Incredibly, the driver, found to have been carelessly ignoring road signs, survived with only injuries. No matter the area or the technology, the sheer cliffs of the North Yungas Road remain the ultimate equalizer. As we've mentioned, for years, between 200 and 300 people lost their lives on this road annually. To put that in perspective, this toll equaled anywhere from a quarter to half of all homicides in the rest of Bolivia that year. In a way, this single 56-kilometer stretch of road became Bolivia's most prolific killer. Now, the locals are well aware of just how dangerous this road is. Nick Berg, a travel journalist for the BBC, travelled the road in the early 2000s and spoke to Captain Hernard Romero of Police Rescue. In his 8 years of service, Captain Romero attended 30 rescues involving 250 people, yet he was only able to save about 100. His explanation for the high death toll was straightforward. The reason the death toll is so high is that the trucks and buses that travel the road are overloaded with people. In 2002, we had 4 buses that went over the edge. When asked about the road's infamous nickname, he responded, "I do not like that term. It is just a road." Berg also spoke to Timoteo, a 52-year-old man who had worked as a human traffic light on the road for over a decade, standing at particularly dangerous spots to warn drivers of approaching vehicles around treacherous bends. He scratched out a living from tips given by grateful drivers and lived right on the roadside. When asked why he took on the risky job, Timoteo revealed that in 1978 he lost his family when their vehicle plunged over the cliff, and he wanted to prevent other families from suffering the same fate. It is a deeply human story set against the backdrop of a road where death has become all too familiar. Over the years, the North Yungas Road has been the subject of several high-profile media pieces. Channel 4 in the UK aired a documentary on the road, and Top Gear, the popular UK car show, famously visited in 2009 during one of Clarkson, Hammond and May's many adventures. One memorable scene from the Bolivia special takes place on the death road itself as Clarkson nervously inches forward in a 4x4 alongside a large SUV. He leans out the window, watching his wheels to make sure they stay on the edge and don't creep even an inch too far. It's hair-raising stuff to watch, even if you've seen it multiple times. You can even experience part of the North Yungas Road digitally. Google Earth allows you to follow the winding roads part way up to La Paz. All we can say is we feel sorry for the Google employee who had to map that route. Thank you, mystery man. Thank you for letting us explore it ourselves from the safety of our homes. Given its notorious history, you might assume the North Yungas Road is still the most dangerous road in the world, right? Well, yes and no. Like many things, it's complicated. No one is denying that this road is still dangerous. Its grim statistics and countless memorials ensure it will be known as El Camino de la Muerte for many years to come. However, while the hazards remain, the level of risk has been somewhat reduced over the years. The road has undergone several changes. Guardrails have been installed in certain areas, undoubtedly saving lives from those deadly falls. Additionally, a major construction project in 2006 widened some of the most dangerous sections by carving further into the cliffside. Now, when the Top Gear crew drove the North Yungas Road in 2009, it still looked pretty treacherous. So while the changes over the years have made it a bit less dangerous, the improvements haven't completely transformed it. In fact, the most significant safety measure wasn't on the road itself. In 2006, after 20 years of construction, a completely separate highway, Ruta Nacional 3, was opened to the public. This new route serves as a bypass between Carretera and La Paz, offering modern safety like bridges, guardrails, drainage, a paved surface, multiple lanes, road markings, and even sidewalks for pedestrians. So, with a much safer alternative, why would someone use the road of death? Why risk your life when you could take a perfectly safe modern highway instead? Well, most locals agree, and today the majority use the newer highway. However, some areas remain accessible via only the North Yungas Road, which means there's still some traffic, just much less than before. Fewer vehicles means fewer collisions, and fewer hair-raising narrow passes, and fewer large vehicles tumbling off the cliffs with their passengers inside. Yet despite the reduced traffic, people still die on this road every year. It's hard to explain why some continue to take the risk, even with the safer bypass available. In 2019, 13 years after the new road opened, a bus full of passengers still careened off the road, resulting in a tragic loss of life. There's also the road's grim reputation, which attracts thrill seekers who may underestimate the danger. Less traffic might make it safer, but there's always the risk of people thinking it's overhyped and not treating it with the seriousness it deserves. For even the most experienced extreme cyclist or motorist, one slip, one wrong move, or one small mistake could still send you plummeting to your death. The road is still in use today, although its clientele has changed quite a bit. Starting in the 1990s, hobbyists, adrenaline junkies, and thrill seekers from around the globe began flocking to the North Yungas Road, and not to drive but to cycle. Yeah, it's since become something of an extreme sports tourist attraction, drawing around 25,000 daring adventurers over the years. It's now a cottage industry where people pay good money for the chance to risk their lives on this infamous road. And yes, despite the safety precautions, some still don't make it. So is running tours on this road dangerous? Well, yeah, absolutely. In the 1990s, it would have been especially reckless. But undoubtedly, it's the danger which draws people to the road. But a few factors have made it safer for tourists. Today, at least safer than it once was. Large sections of the road were officially closed to regular traffic after the bypass was built, though some remote rural areas still rely on it for access. This means the road sees limited use by motorists, which help reduce the risk. It's a heartening thought to imagine that Timoteo, who spent years acting as a human traffic light out of passion and grief, played a small role in making the road safer and honoring his family's memory. Nowadays, cycling the death road can be relatively safe if you're experienced, if you have good equipment, if the weather is favorable, and if you've got a reliable guide, along with mechanics and medical staff on standby. During peak season, up to 250 cyclists descend from La Paz every day. For as little as $80, you can take a trip down the road, whether by bike or by 4x4, risking life and limb. Tour operators provide guides, transport equipment, and everything you might need. But as always, there's a catch. You're relying on equipment maintained in a country that didn't install guardrails along the road to begin with. Some tour advertisements even caution that certain companies, unnamed of course, don't keep their bikes or vehicles properly maintained. So if you're unlucky enough to get bad equipment on a bad weather day, what starts as a safe tour on one of the world's most dangerous roads could quickly turn fatal. It's worth noting that according to dangerousroads.org, at least 20 cyclists have been killed on the road since 1998. So while it's clearly dangerous, it no longer claims lives at the same rate that it once did. The municipality of Carretera, responsible for maintaining the North Yungas Road, introduced a fee of 50 bolivanos, about $7.23 for cyclists, which goes towards the road's ongoing upkeep. The money is used for everything from cleaning the public toilets along the route, and if you haven't already soiled yourself from just being there, to more critical services like maintenance, security, and emergency rescue operations. The way you pay this fee, however, feels like a dark joke, courtesy of the Carretera municipality, perfectly fitting for this road. You pay 25 bolivianos at the start of the road and another 25 at the end. So if you don't make it to the finish line, well, at least you got a discount. Every cloud has a silver lining, doesn't it? So is the North Yungas Road still the most dangerous road in the world today? Well, kinda. Does it still see the same number of accidents and fatalities that earned it the infamous title in the 1990s? No. By all accounts, the road is statistically safer, but that's mostly because it was effectively closed to regular traffic thanks to the construction of that highway. To put it another way, this road was so dangerous they had to shut it down and build a new one, and yet people still die on it every year. That's a legacy. A dark and macabre one, sure, but it's a legacy nonetheless. It's important to acknowledge there are likely other roads around the world that are just as dangerous, if not more so. Roads in countries like India, Pakistan, Ukraine, Turkey, and Afghanistan certainly come to mind. The label the most dangerous in the world, given by the Inter-American Development Bank back in the 1990s, is a useful shorthand to convey just how treacherous the road is. But it's difficult to definitively determine which road holds the title of the most dangerous. What yardstick would you even use for such a comparison? Is it the number of deaths per mile, the design and layout of the road, the quality of the road surface? Then you have to consider how busy it is, whether local traffic laws are enforced, and whether conditions have changed over time. There are so many factors that influence how dangerous a road is perceived to be, and each one varies depending on the region. Take Afghanistan or Ukraine, for example. A road already considered deadly becomes even more perilous in a war zone where militants or active conflict add to the danger. That's one thing other roads might have over the North Yungas Road. There's no active conflict there today, but that fact makes its legacy even more remarkable. This road was deemed the most dangerous in the world, and it's not even in a war zone. Ultimately, that speaks volumes about the inherent danger of the road itself rather than external circumstances. When it comes to sheer peril, it's hard to imagine many roads being more dangerous than this one, and it is as simple as that. Except, just south of the North Yungas Road lies its lesser-known sibling, the South Yungas Road, also known as the Chulamani Road. While not quite as infamous, it shares many of the same deadly features: narrow paths, hairpin turns, and towering drops reaching heights of over 3.5 kilometers. It's almost a carbon copy of its northern counterpart, but with a lot less fanfare. In reality, the most dangerous road in the world might not be as unique as it seems. There's an identical one just down the way. The true danger here isn't necessarily the road itself, it's the landscape, the harsh terrain. It's the hubris of humans to build and travel on these roads in the first place. It's almost like a challenge to Mother Nature, and she wanted her revenge. Whether it truly holds the title of the most dangerous road in the world or not, and statistically it's hard to beat, there's something about the North Yungas Road that continues to draw people in. Whether out of military necessity, the daily grind of commute, or the thrill of adrenaline seekers, this road has captured imaginations for decades. It stands as a reminder that just because something can be done doesn't mean that it should be. It's also a memorial for the countless lives lost over its cliffs, a road that forged its legacy despite human efforts to tame it without a single shot fired. That kind of legacy is usually reserved for iconic highways like Germany's Autobahn or Britain's M25, but this is a dirt track, almost 4 kilometers up in the sky. Now, maybe we're reading too much into it. Maybe at the end of the day, it's just a road. But that doesn't mean it shouldn't be treated with the respect and reverence it deserves. After all, if you find yourself on the most dangerous road in the world and don't take it seriously, that's a surefire way to end up careening over the edge at high speed. Not to worry though, it's not the fall that kills you, it's that sudden stop at the bottom. Thanks for watching.